All right, guys. So there is a portion in the notes that go through Lewis structures, which are basically Lewis dot diagrams where you create a molecule. I am not going to go over that, so you can just put an X through those. If you're doing it on ClassKick, then just don't fill in those pages. I think it's just one page talking about the Lewis dot structures. So this video is just basically to remind you of what we have learned regarding ions. Now, again, if you learn nothing from chemistry, this first sentence, the only subatomic particle that cannot change is the proton. Remember, proton is like our DNA. It's like what makes us us. Like our core DNA is what makes us us. And so we don't change that. And so just like every element, you have a proton, which is the positive charge. It never changes. That's why it's the atomic number. The atomic number also never changes. Now, when we change neutrons, so we can change neutrons all day long because they have no charge, so it's easy to change them. We call that an isotope. And we've discussed that before, and we'll discuss it again later. But today we're talking about when we change electrons, we get ions. So you have the number of electrons is equal to the number of protons in a stable atom. So in an atom where the charge is 0, protons and electrons are equal. Anything where the protons and electrons are not equal means we have an ion. So ions are atoms that have gained or lost electrons. And the reason they gain or lose these electrons goes back to the octet rule, which we learned a long time ago, which basically that they want to be full or happy in terms of valence electrons. So if most of the elements that we talk about, their valence electrons are on the second energy level and they want to be full at 8. Okay, so they're out there looking like carbon has 4 valence electrons. They're out there looking for 4 other electrons to either share or give away in order to have a full outer shell. All right, some atoms lose electrons. Those are our metals. And others gain electrons. Those are our nonmetals. And we've talked about metals and nonmetals when we did our whole periodic table, and you guys colored in the periodic table and you colored in metals and nonmetals. Cations are formed when electrons are lost. When you lose an electron, you become more positive. Okay? When you lose an electron, you become more positive because electrons are negative and you're losing them, which means 2 negatives. Losing is a negative, an electron is a negative, is a positive. You think of like if you have a friend or a boyfriend or girlfriend who's super negative all the time, when you finally break up with them, then you become more positive. I don't know if that helps you remember or not, but when you lose electrons, you are more positive and you are a cation. If you gain electrons, you become more negative and you're an anion. The number of electrons lost or gained depends on their location on the periodic table. So group 1 elements will lose 1 electron. Group 2 elements lose 2 electrons. And group 3 will lose 3 electrons. That means that they will form a 1 cation, 2 cation, or 3 cation respectively. Cation, remember, is positive because it is losing electrons. Group 14 will form 4, or it will either form a positive 4 or a negative 4 depending on the element, because those have 4 valence electrons in their outer shell. So it's just as easy for them to give up 4 electrons as it is to gain 4 electrons. So that will be, you'll have to pay attention to that when you're looking at the periodic table. Now, group 15 elements form a negative 3 ion. That means they take in 3 electrons. Group 16 elements take in 2 electrons and become a negative 2 anion. Group 17 form a 1 ion, and group 18 are full. Those are your noble gases, and they are full and happy. They don't need nobody else. They are single and they are free, and they are happy about it. So they don't need anything. All right, now these next two slides have to do with this slide and this slide have to do with Lewis dot structures of molecules, which I said that we weren't going to do. So just ignore these. Don't worry about that. The information that you will be responsible for were essentially the reviewing of the ions, because we already talked about ions. And then this is the new information: how many electrons are being gained or lost. And this is going to be super important because our next set of notes, our next little unit is going to be on bonding. And bonding is how elements or how ions are going to, or elements are going to fill their outer shell and become ions. Okay, so that's all that you need to know for this video.